The candelabra's flame flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the damask tablecloth. The rich aroma of our untouched entrees had long since faded to a cool, indifferent silence. What I'm about to tell you will challenge everything you think you know about trust. Serafina Lamont, her lips still gleaming with the deep crimson of her Cabernet, leaned forward, a conspiratorial glint in her striking blue eyes. It was a joke, a casual aside, dropped with the same ease one might discuss the evening's appetizer special. I've found someone else. For us. Not I'm sorry. Not I made a terrible mistake. Just that, as if she were announcing a surprise weekend getaway. My breath hitched. I found myself instinctively waiting for the punchline, for that mischievous smirk she sometimes wore when she thought I was too rigid, too predictable. She enjoyed rattling me, but the smile never wavered, only deepened. You know how relationships can become comfortable, like an old, worn-out cashmere sweater? I thought perhaps a new dynamic, a little jolt, would reawaken us both. She then meticulously sliced into her pan-seared scallops, her gaze distant, as if contemplating complex market strategies rather than the ruin of our shared history. Beyond the restaurant's panoramic window, a young couple strolled past, hands intertwined. He paused to press a tender kiss to the crown of her head, a silent vow of forever. Meanwhile, inside, my wife was unraveling the threads of our marriage with the dispassionate tone of someone returning an ill-fitting garment. Thane, she offered, his name slipping out with the casual grace of a falling petal. He's just exhilarating. He connects with me in ways I haven't felt since you and I first met, Elias. I hadn't uttered a single word since her initial bombshell. My fork, laden with a piece of roasted asparagus, hung suspended midair. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Every instinct screamed to lash out, to weep, to flee. But I remained, a silent sponge soaking up each syllable, each insidious drop of her confession. They felt like poison, sugar-coated and utterly lethal. I wasn't going to mention it quite yet, she continued, leaning closer, her voice dropping to a low, earnest tone. But I believe in absolute honesty, don't you? She said it with such guileless conviction, I half expected her to present me with a gold star for my patient understanding. Thank her for systematically dismantling our union over an exorbitantly priced seafood platter. But the true gut punch wasn't just the infidelity itself. It was the calculated precision. The way she had selected this specific restaurant, chosen her most alluring dress, worn the emerald earrings I'd given her on our 5th anniversary. She had meticulously curated an evening, allowing me to believe we were on the precipice of rekindling a lost spark. All the while, she was preparing to serve me betrayal as the main course. When my voice finally returned, it was a raspy whisper. You orchestrated this. Every single detail. A faint, almost triumphant smile touched her lips. I wanted you to hear it from me first, she explained, before anything surfaced online. That was the moment the world truly tilted on its axis. And in that instant, a chilling clarity descended upon me. I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't plead, but she, I knew, would regret every single second of this evening. She clearly hadn't anticipated my composure. Her smile flickered, a momentary glitch in her perfectly constructed facade, when I deliberately picked up my water glass and took a slow, measured sip, as if her words hadn't just plunged a serrated blade into my chest. That visibly rattled her, and for the first time in years, I allowed her to stew in that unfamiliar discomfort. She was accustomed to my immediate reactions, my frantic apologies, my desperate explanations, my tendency to collapse into myself like a cornered animal whenever her displeasure surfaced. But not tonight. Not with Thane's name echoing in my mind like a discordant, unshakable melody. The server, oblivious to the silent battlefield, presented the check. I watched Serafina perform her well-rehearsed charade of reaching for her purse, a practiced gesture to appear gracious, all while fully expecting me to shoulder the cost, as always. I let the silence stretch, agonizingly long, before finally producing my card. She offered a quick approving glance, as if I'd passed some unspoken test. Little did she know the silent storm I was already brewing. Here's what no one tells you about betrayal. It always leaves a trail. What she remained blissfully unaware of, and what I had nearly forgotten myself, was that 3 weeks prior, I had discreetly installed a new home security system. Not because I suspected infidelity, but due to a peculiar string of incidents involving our mailbox. One of the indoor cameras, nestled unobtrusively in the living room, had accidentally been set to continuous cloud recording. I hadn't bothered to check the footage. I wasn't even certain it was still functional. But sitting there watching her serene, self-satisfied smile, the memory resurfaced. And for the first time since her confession, a cold, sharp shard of clarity pierced through the haze of shock. She believed she held all the cards. She believed she was orchestrating the perfect exit. But the truth about deception is its inherent arrogance. It grows cocky. It often overlooks the minor details, like a tiny motion sensor tucked behind a framed photograph. So I settled the bill. I rose from the table, uttering not a single word. She looked genuinely perplexed, perhaps even a little piqued. "That's it?" she asked, a faint edge of annoyance in her voice. "No shouting? No questions?" I simply shook my head. "Not yet," I replied, my voice steady. "But very soon." Then I turned and walked out. I didn't wait for her to follow. I didn't hold the heavy oak door. I left her sitting amidst the remnants of her wine and her ill-placed pride, convinced she'd triumphed in some profound philosophical debate on love and personal liberation. But in my mind, my fingers were already flying across the interface of the security app. Ready to learn the shocking truth? What I was about to uncover would pulverize her meticulously constructed narrative into irreparable fragments. Upon reaching our silent house, I left the lights off. I stood in the inky darkness, my phone clutched in my hand, staring at the glowing icon of the security app as if it were a cursed artifact. A part of me, a deep, wounded part, yearned for ignorance. I wanted to pretend the dinner had never happened, to believe I could simply unhear her words, maybe sleep on the sofa, and wake to convince myself it was all a vivid nightmare. But I knew better. The profound silence of the house, once a comfort, now felt heavy, menacing. With a deep, fortifying breath, I tapped the screen. The app sprang to life, displaying a week's worth of auto-archived footage from the living room. I scrolled through hours of mundane emptiness, shifting shadows, the occasional flicker of external light. Then a distinct movement. 2 figures. One was undeniably Serafina, the other him, not a blurred silhouette, not a stranger. It was Thane. He looked precisely as I'd feared, confident, overtly familiar, his shirt slightly unbuttoned, carrying an air of absolute belonging, as if he'd been there countless times before. And Serafina. She greeted him like a hero returning from a long-fought battle, arms wrapping around his neck, whispering secrets into his ear, laughing with a vibrant, uninhibited joy I hadn't witnessed in years. The most agonizing part? She looked utterly happy, not guilty, not ashamed, just profoundly, unequivocally happy. They kissed on the very sofa where we had once joyfully planned our wedding guest list. He poured them wine into the crystal glasses we'd received as an anniversary gift. She settled into his lap, her hand resting on his chest with a possessive ease. And I just stood there, breathing slowly, my eyes unblinking, watching my entire life unravel, one recorded second at a time. At one point, she uttered my name. That alone was enough to make me hit pause. My heart leaped. I rewound, replayed the snippet. Elias has absolutely no clue. I swear he still believes I'm at yoga. Then they both burst into laughter. Which hurt more, the betrayal or being reduced to a punchline? For the first time in what felt like an eternity, a new emotion stirred within me. Not rage, not sorrow, not fear, strategy. If this was the game she wished to play with our marriage, I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't create a scene. I would do what I had always done best, observe quietly, then act when it was least expected. She thought I would crumble, but the truth was I had already begun forging something infinitely stronger, right beneath her oblivious gaze. For the next 2 days, I remained largely silent. She noticed, of course. She remarked on my newfound quietness, even playfully suggesting I might finally be embracing mindfulness, much like her yoga instructor often preached. I nodded, offering a practiced smile when necessary. I allowed her to remain ensconced in her fantasy, where she was still the master of her domain, her secret carefully tucked behind rehearsed smiles and convenient half-truths. But my vision was sharper now. I cataloged every detail, the exact time she left, the frequency of her phone checks, the subtle curl of her lips when an unspoken thought crossed her mind. Thane wasn't merely a spark. He was a raging inferno she was meticulously feeding, while I, her husband, slowly choked on the smoke. I began my silent documentation. Nothing overtly dramatic, just screenshots, time-stamped audio memos, meticulous notes. Every fabrication she uttered now found its place in a digital folder I aptly labeled Future Clarity. I wasn't plotting an explosion. I was meticulously planning a clean, surgical exit, one delivered with a precision that would echo long after I was gone. The first seed I planted arrived in a pristine white envelope. I left it casually on the kitchen counter just before heading out to the hardware store. It was blank, sealed, but possessed a subtle weight, enough to pique her formidable curiosity. And I knew intimately that her curiosity often outweighed her patience. Predictably, upon my return, it was gone, and she said nothing. That silence, I realized, spoke volumes. Inside that envelope had been a single, printed receipt for a meeting I'd supposedly scheduled with a divorce attorney. A fabricated one, of course. Just a name, a date, a legitimate-looking firm's logo. It was bait, and she, without a moment's hesitation, took it whole. That evening, her entire demeanor shifted. She became solicitous, hovering. She offered to massage my shoulders, a gesture she hadn't made in nearly a year. She even prepared my favorite comfort soup. Her eyes, however, kept darting towards me, calculating, trying to discern the depth of my knowledge. She believed she was engaged in a complex game of chess. She had no idea I was already 4 moves ahead. Later that night, I feigned sleep on the living room sofa. Moments later, I heard her tiptoe to our bedroom, phone in hand. 10 minutes passed, then I caught the faint murmur of her voice, a strained whisper. We might have a problem. That was the definitive confirmation I needed. She wasn't sorry. She was terrified. And that, in a twisted, unexpected way, felt far more satisfying than any revenge I could have concocted. The following morning, I departed the house earlier than usual. No explanation, no customary kiss, just the quiet scrape of my coffee mug, the soft jingle of my keys, and the click of the front door. I knew she was watching from the hallway, peeking around the door frame like a child caught sneaking out of bed. Her continued silence confirmed it. She was still processing the impact of the fake envelope, still debating whether I was bluffing or meticulously preparing to burn down our shared world. Good. Let her squirm. I didn't venture far. I merely parked 3 blocks away and waited. 10 minutes later, she emerged. Not in her workout clothes, not dressed for errands, but clearly dressed to follow someone. Me. I watched her slide into her car, glance around nervously, and then slowly accelerate in the direction I had taken. A slow smile spread across my face. I hadn't planned this part, but it was far too perfect to ignore. So I began to walk. No specific destination, just a slow, deliberate pace through the quiet suburban streets. I ducked into a small coffee shop, navigated a winding alley, even paused to admire a display in a charming bookstore window. She trailed me the entire time, her movements clumsy, obvious. I could see her reflection in the polished glass of storefronts. I could hear the faint, urgent click of her heels quickening whenever I crossed a street. Eventually, I circled back to my car and drove off once more, this time to my actual destination, a nondescript office park on the quiet periphery of town where my old college friend Nathaniel Miller worked. Nathaniel was a forensic accountant. While I hadn't divulged every intricate detail, I'd provided enough information for him to paint a clear picture of what it might look like if, say, one spouse had been subtly siphoning funds from joint accounts. It turned out Serafina had small, frequent transfers, vaguely coded wellness expenses, travel reimbursements that corresponded to no trips I remembered. In the last 5 months alone, over $6,000 had silently vanished from our shared savings. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow, a flicker of concern in his usually jovial eyes. Divorce or not, Elias, he stated gravely, this is outright theft. I offered no outward reaction, merely a nod of thanks. I think he expected a torrent of emotion, but I was long past that point. I now possessed irrefutable proof of her affair, undeniable evidence of her deception, and a clear financial motive. All that remained was impeccable timing. When I arrived home, she was in the kitchen, a domestic tableau of butter and flour. She'd baked something, perhaps banana bread. I didn't ask. She looked up, startled, her voice cracking when she spoke. "Where were you?" I offered a soft, almost ethereal smile. "Oh, just needed some air." She nodded too quickly, as if agreeing with a statement that had never been uttered. And for the first time, I realized she was truly afraid to lose me. Not out of love, but out of a paralyzing fear of relinquishing control. And I had no intention of ceding an inch. She must have believed she was meticulously covering her tracks. The new passcode on her phone, the way she now instinctively turned her screen face down whenever I entered a room, her sudden, passionate interest in going offline more often, immersing herself in physical books, journaling, disconnecting from the incessant digital noise, as she so eloquently put it. It would have been almost impressive had it not been so tragically late. I had already seen enough, heard enough, knew enough, and she, stubbornly, remained under the delusion that she could still steer this narrative. But it was the group text that irrevocably altered everything. Thane, that clever, smug bastard. He had no idea his number was still lurking in the backup files of our shared laptop, a remnant from that one time he'd graciously helped Serafina set up her Spotify account. I recognized his voice from the security footage. And now I possessed his number, which granted me access to an entire constellation of information, including the invitation to a private little soiree scheduled for Friday night. A casual, upscale, discreet gathering, and whose name was prominently featured on the RSVP list. Hers, not mine. The venue was one of those chic, modern townhomes nestled in the heart of the Arts District. Stark concrete walls, warm Edison bulbs casting a golden glow, the pervasive scent of artisanal, overpriced candles in every room. I arrived precisely 40 minutes after the official start time. I wasn't dressed for confrontation, just neutral jeans, a simple jacket, my hair neatly combed. She didn't spot me initially. She was too engrossed, too vibrantly alive, laughing with Thane in the kitchen, a wine glass held casually, one leg crossed elegantly over the other, as if she were the rightful sovereign of the room. He stood too close. She leaned in too easily. It was all so effortlessly intimate, so profoundly familiar, that not a single soul in that crowded room would have guessed she was a married woman. Not one until I stepped fully into their view. She froze. Her wine glass tilted precariously, a tiny splash of red spilling over the rim. She caught it, but she couldn't catch the sudden, suffocating silence that descended upon the room. Thane turned, his confident smile faltering the moment his eyes met mine. He attempted a clumsy recovery, extending a hand, muttering something about, "Didn't realize you'd be here." I ignored him completely. Instead, my gaze locked onto hers. "I was under the impression this was a networking event," I stated, my voice cutting through the suddenly profound quiet. "Not a pre-nuptial date night." Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, gasping for air. "Elias, I merely allowed her to flounder. "You know the thing that was meant to spice up our relationship?" A gasp rippled through a small group in the corner. Then, with deliberate slowness, I pulled the envelope from my inner jacket pocket. Not divorce papers, photos, crisp, undeniable stills from the security footage, each meticulously labeled, time-stamped. I didn't hand them to her. I placed them gently on the polished kitchen counter, right beside the bottle of exquisite wine she hadn't paid for. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't need to utter another word. The silence she stood in would scream volumes for days to come. She didn't return home that night. Not by midnight, not by 3 in the morning. Our bedroom remained precisely as I left it. Impeccably neat, undisturbed, hushed. No discarded makeup wipes on the counter. No shoes kicked off haphazardly by the door. Just a profound, perfect silence. By morning, I had 2 unread texts from her. The first read, "We need to talk." The second, sent hours later, "Please don't do anything stupid." What if everything you believe about forgiveness is a lie? That was the one that sparked a dry, humorless laugh. Not because it was inherently funny, but because it confirmed my deepest suspicion. She hadn't revealed the full truth to anyone yet. She was still scrambling, desperately hoping I would remain silent long enough for her to meticulously rewrite the narrative. That I was overreacting, that I suffered from abandonment issues, that I had simply misunderstood what she meant by sleeping with another man for both of us. But it was no longer me she needed to convince. The pictures I'd left on that counter at the party didn't stay there long. Someone, perhaps Thane, perhaps one of her work acquaintances, had snapped a photo and discreetly circulated it. By midday, 2 of her longtime co-workers had unfollowed her on social media. One even posted a cryptic tweet that read, "Y'all better stop playing marriage counselor when your own house is on fire." Then came the voicemail. It wasn't intended for me. I knew because she didn't utter my name even once. She was weeping, gasping between words, pleading with someone, Thane most likely, not to abandon her just because things got complicated. She cried, "I thought you said this would make him stronger. You said I deserved to feel alive again." Her voice cracked halfway through the desperate plea. "Please, just call me back. I'm losing everything." On that singular point, she was absolutely correct. I hadn't filed any legal paperwork yet, hadn't made any official moves, but I had quietly withdrawn half of our shared savings, the exact half I had personally contributed. I also canceled the joint credit card she had been so freely using for those dinners I was never invited to. I moved into the guest bedroom, locking the door, not as a punishment, but to establish an undeniable boundary she could no longer breach. That night, she finally came home. She knocked softly on my door. "Elias," she whispered, her voice fragile and hesitant. "I know I messed up." I offered no response. A moment later, a folded note appeared, sliding silently under the door. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to, because the only thing I truly desired from her now was space and the quiet, crushing understanding that some apologies simply arrived too late. 3 weeks bled into one another. She cried most nights, her muffled sobs emanating from the bedroom door she had once so casually locked me out of. She left little notes on the fridge, tender reminders that, in a distant past, would have held profound meaning. "I made your favorite chamomile tea," or "Can we please talk tonight?" I answered none of them. I didn't scream, didn't accuse. That part of me had gone utterly quiet, like a radio finally unplugged after years of discordant static. What I did instead was breathe. I started jogging again, just 15 minutes around the neighborhood, but it felt as though my lungs had become entirely my own once more. I dusted off a used acoustic guitar I hadn't touched since college. I met with Nathaniel again, not to discuss finances, but simply for coffee. I laughed, a real, unforced laugh this time. Not the hollow, practiced kind I used to fake at dinner parties where she'd subtly nudge me under the table to smile more. I wasn't bitter anymore, just profoundly, exquisitely clear. She once stopped me on a random Tuesday as I walked past her in the hallway. "Is this truly it?" she asked, her voice tinged with a raw desperation. I paused, met her eyes, and said, "No. It was a long time ago. This is just me, finally admitting it." The day I finally left, there was no dramatic scene. I packed a single suitcase, left the key on the counter. No grand speeches, no theatrical goodbyes, just the profound lightness of freedom and a quiet that no longer felt empty, but deeply, truly earned. What became of Thane? I don't know. I don't care. That chapter of the story closed without me, and that precisely is how it should have ended. Now I live in a small apartment above a charming bookstore. The walls are thin, but the peace that permeates these rooms is undeniably real. I even hosted my brother last weekend. We talked, we laughed for hours. No awkward glances, no unspoken secrets hanging heavy in the air. Just life as it should be, honest, authentic, and beautifully unburdened. People often believe that true closure only comes through confrontation, through explosive arguments or meticulously orchestrated revenge. But sometimes the most profound closure is simply walking away without needing to prove a single thing. Why failure is the key to success? Sometimes letting go is winning. So that's my story. A quiet man, a ruined dinner, and the day I stopped begging for a love that was never truly, authentically mine.